heaven and hell. The rich and the poor in heaven. 2. 360. I have spoken with some after death who, while they lived in the world, renounced the world and gave themselves up to an almost solitary life, in order that by an abstraction of the thoughts from worldly things they might have opportunity for pious meditations, believing that thus they might enter the way to heaven. But these in the other life are of a sad disposition. They despise others who are not like themselves. They are indignant that they do not have a happier lot than others. Believing that they have merited it, they have no interest in others, and turn away from the duties of charity by which there is conjunction with heaven. They desire heaven more than others, but when they are taken up among the angels they induce anxieties that disturb the happiness of the angels, and in consequence they are sent away, and when sent away they take themselves to desert places, where they lead a life like that which they lived in the world. 2. Man can be formed for heaven only by means of the world. In the world are the ultimate effects in which everyone's affection must be terminated, for unless affection puts itself forth or flows out into acts, which is done in association with many, it is suffocated to such a degree finally that man has no longer any regard for the neighbor, but only for himself. All this makes clear that a life of charity towards the neighbor, which is doing what is just and right in every word and in every employment, leads to heaven, and not a life of piety apart from charity. From this it follows that only to the extent that man is engaged in the employments of life can charity be exercised and the life of charity grow, and this is impossible to the extent that man separates himself from those employments. On this subject I will speak now from experience. 3 of those who, while in the world, were employed in trade and commerce and became rich through these pursuits. There are many in heaven, but not so many of those who were in stations of honor and became rich through their offices, and for the reason that these latter, by the gains and honors that resulted from their dispensing justice and equity, and also by the lucrative and honorable positions bestowed on them, were led into loving themselves and the world and thereby separating their thoughts and affections from heaven and turning them to themselves. For to the extent that a man loves self and the world and looks to self and the world in everything, he alienates himself from the divine and removes himself from heaven. Charity towards the neighbor is doing what is good, just, and right, in every word and every employment. Thus charity towards the neighbor extends to all things and each thing that a man thinks, wills, and does. A life of piety apart from a life of charity is of no avail, but together they are profitable for all things. 361. As to the lot of the rich in heaven, they live more splendidly than others. Some of them dwell in palaces wherein everything is resplendent as if with gold and silver. They have an abundance of all things for the uses of life, but they do not in the least set their heart on these things, but on their actual uses. Uses are clearly seen as if they were in light, but the gold and silver are seen obscurely, and comparatively as if in shade. This is because while they were in the world they loved uses, and loved gold and silver only as means and instruments. It is the uses that are thus resplendent in heaven, the good of use like gold and the truth of use like silver. Therefore, their wealth in heaven is such as their uses were in the world, and such, too, are their delight and happiness. Good uses are providing oneself and one's own with the necessaries of life, also desiring wealth for the sake of one's country and for the sake of one's neighbor, whom a rich man can in many ways benefit more than a poor man. These are good uses because one is able thereby to withdraw his mind from an indolent life which is harmful, since in such a life man's thoughts run to evil because of the evil inherent in him. These uses are good to the extent that they have the divine in them, that is, to the extent that man looks to the divine and to heaven, and places his good in these, and sees in wealth only a subservient good. Every good has its delight from use and in accordance with use, also its quality, and in consequence such as the use is such is the good. All the happiness and delight of life is from uses. In general, life is a life of uses. Angelic life consists in the goods of law and charity, thus in performing uses. The ends that man has in view, which are uses, are the only things that the Lord, and thus the angels, consider. The kingdom of the Lord is a kingdom of uses. Performing uses is serving the Lord. Everyone's character is such as are the uses he performs. Illustrated 362. But the law of the rich who have not believed in the divine, and have cast out of their minds the things pertaining to heaven and the church, is the opposite of this. Such are in hell, where filth, misery, and want exist, and into such things, riches that are loved as an end are changed, and not only riches, but also their very uses, which are either a wish to live as they like and indulge in pleasures, and to have opportunity to give the mind more fully and freely to shameful practices, or a wish to rise above others whom they despise. Such riches and such uses, because they have nothing spiritual, but only what is earthly in them, become filthy for a spiritual purpose in riches, and their uses is lie the soul in the body, more like the light of heaven in moist ground, and such riches and uses become putrid as the body does without a soul, or as moist ground does without the light of heaven. Such are those whom riches have seduced and drawn away from heaven. 363. Every man's ruling affection or love remains with him after death, nor is it rooted out to eternity, since a man's spirit is wholly what his love is, and what is an arcanum. The body of every spirit and angel is the outward form of his love, exactly corresponding to his inward form, which is the form of his animus and mind. Consequently, spirits are known as to their quality from their face, gestures, and speech. While a man is living in the world, the quality of the spirit would be known if he had not learned to counterfeit in his face, movements, and speech that which is not his own. From this it can be confirmed that man remains to eternity such as his ruling affection or love is. It has been granted me to talk with some who lived 17 centuries ago, and whose lives are well known from writings of that time, and it was found that the same love still rules them as it did then. It can also be confirmed from this that the love of riches, and of uses from riches, remains with everyone to eternity, and that it is exactly the same as the love acquired in the world, yet with the difference that in the case of those who devoted their riches to good uses, riches are changed in the other world into delights which are in accord with the uses performed, while in the case of those who devoted their riches to evil uses, riches are turned into mere filth, in which they then take the same delight as they did in the world in their riches devoted to evil uses. Such men take delight in filth because filthy pleasures and shameful acts, which had been the uses to which they had devoted their riches, and also avarice, which is a love of riches without regard to use, correspond to filth. Spiritual filth is nothing else. Next, I will read The Rich and the Poor in Heaven. 3. If you have information about heaven, please click on subscribe and like. Thank you.